What do you depend upon in your life? What do you need to be happy? These are questions we're going to talk about today in Bible Study with Friends when we look at what in life is necessary for us to be happy. What do we depend upon? Who do we depend upon? And we'll look at that when we come right back. Welcome to Bible Study with Friends, where our goal is to help you get more impact from your Bible study. I'm here with my friend Stan Ford, and Stan and I are going to continue in Ecclesiastes, right?
Yes, sir. Chapter 5.
It's going to be great. We're going to finish chapter 5 today, and it's a very interesting chapter for this idea of what do you depend upon to be happy? Or who do you depend upon to be happy might be a better question. But anyway, a question that we need to consider, especially in this day and age where people are pursuing the buck. Now, last week, Solomon talked about religion and going through the motions of religion.
Yeah.
This week, he switches, and now he's going to talk about really the insufficiencies, the fact that money doesn't make it for you, okay? And we're going to talk about that, and he's going to talk about that, and we're going to ask ourselves some questions as we go here. Are you ready to get into the Word?
I am.
We're going to do that right now. Okay. Now, we're going to start at verse 8, and we're going all the way down to the end of the chapter, verse 20. And it starts right out. Solomon switches gears very easily here, and Solomon is going to talk about money and wealth. Remember, the theme is the struggle for contentment. And late in his reign, Solomon is going to make some observations. And remember now, observations of the natural man without God and the spiritual man with God in his life. And we're going to pick that up right now. The first two verses, it's interesting that I thought it was funny that Solomon's going to talk about money. So the first place he goes is government corruption.
Yeah.
Money, government corruption. First thing. Read verse 8 and 9, Stan.
If you see the oppressed of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in the providence, do not be shocked at the sight. For one official watches over another official, and there are higher officials over them. After all, a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land.
It's an interesting couple verses. I like the way the New Living Translation puts it. So I'm going to put that over here. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Let me read those two verses in the New Living. Don't be surprised if you see a poor person being oppressed by the powerful, and if justice is being miscarried throughout the land. For every official is under orders from higher up, and matters of justice get lost in red tape and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Even the king milks the land for his own profit. I like the way that puts that. This idea of don't be shocked if the government is corrupt.
Yeah.
Because with government comes money, and with money comes corruption.
Yeah.
That's an old saying. And he is speaking here as the king, who is right in the middle of the corruption. I'm going to get to that point in just a second here. He says, but look, if you see the poor being oppressed and there's no justice or righteousness in the land, don't be shocked. And we as Christians shouldn't be shocked by the news.
Yeah. When I was reading this and studying it last week, Lynn, I thought how prevalent that is for today, that we shouldn't be shocked what's going on in our country.
Yeah, and we get outraged that government officials are acting like natural men.
Yeah.
About money in general, about taxations, in fact, I think it's interesting the way we read this. if we're reading this the way it was written, that when he says, because one official watches out or watches over another, that's really, he watches out for another. So one official is watching out for another official, and higher up, they're watching out for another official, and all the way up to the king.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, after all, a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land, right? No, he sucks the land dry is what he's doing.
Yeah.
This idea. Now, he is writing here about his experience with government. And Solomon had, his dad was king, and he watched David, and then he becomes king and he reigns. So he is very familiar with government, and he's very familiar with government in the province, in the land. And we say, no, wait a minute. Solomon was this great king, and he had all this wisdom. He started out a godly king.
Yeah.
But he doesn't end up there. And he's speaking from experience here. In fact, I want to have you jump to a verse in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 4. Now, let me set this up for you while you're getting there. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 4. Solomon dies after he was king over Israel for 40 years. He dies. His son is named Rehoboam.
Yeah.
Rehoboam is approached. He becomes king, and he's approached by some people in the land of Israel. And it's very interesting here, and we see the kind of king that Solomon ended up being. Read First Kings chapter 12, verse 4.
Your father made our yoke hard. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and we will serve you.
Now it's interesting. We see here that Solomon's reign was hard on the people.
Yeah.
Why? Because we know from Solomon's life that he was corrupted by wealth and pleasure and these things, which is one of the reasons why he writes Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
So he puts a hard yoke on the people. Now, it's interesting that his son, Rehoboam, the people come to him and say, can you lighten the load a little bit? We'll serve you like crazy. And he says, no, I'm not going to lighten the load. In fact, I'm going to increase the yoke. And as a result, there is a civil war, and the kingdom of Israel splits. This is where you get the northern tribes and the southern. And they split over this idea of government oppression and government corruption. So Solomon is speaking here from experience. He's saying, well, after all, I've got to cultivate the land, and it's really good for the people to have me as the head of the land. And really, I love the way New Living puts it. He milks it for all it's worth there. So after this idea of wealth corrupts government, he goes into the normal man. From verse 10 down, it says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity. It's a waste.
Yeah.
So this idea of loving money, and if you have money, loving the abundance that comes from the money.
Yeah. And he's speaking from experience here.
He is speaking from experience. Absolutely. Yeah. And this is a New Testament concept. What he just said, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money.
Yeah.
Go to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10.
Okay. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. And some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So
money is not the root of evil, but the love of money, which is the same thing here. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. And 1 Timothy, Paul writing to Timothy, makes it very clear. The love of money will take you off the path.
Yeah.
We need to ask ourselves the question, wait a minute. Do I have a love of money and I want to be rich and I'm pursuing that? Oh man, you're in dangerous water here. Solomon is saying it will not satisfy you to have money.
Yeah.
In fact, I know very wealthy people that are consumed with not losing it and getting more. That's their whole thing. And Solomon's going there. He says, when things increase, verse 11, those who consume them increase. So if you're wealthy and your income increases, there are more people that want what you have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a curse in a sort of way that the more you have,
The more
they,
people
like
want.
he said, I'm sorry.
The more people want.
Yeah. And it's like these people that win the big lotteries and stuff, automatically people start
People
emailing them, texting them, and yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, my dad was a contractor. He built houses, and he had a foreman that was a bricklayer, and he was a great bricklayer. And my dad came to him and said, "I'm going to give you a raise." And the bricklayer said, "No, don't give me a raise." He says, "If you want to, just give me a gift under the table. Don't let anybody know." And my dad went, "What? Why? I want to give you a raise. You deserve one." And he says, No, because if my family finds out, all my relatives will find out that I got a raise. They'll all come to me for money.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's saying here. And he says, when things increase, those who consume them increase. So what is the advantage to their owners except to look on and watch people drain them of their money?
Yeah.
Now, in verse 12, the sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. What do you see in that, Stan?
I see that the first part of it is the working man. He's satisfied with what he has, and he knows that God is provided, and he sleeps well. But the rich man has it all, and he lays awake at night wondering, how can I make the next dollar? How can
or worried about losing it.
Yeah, or losing it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a consistent turning of the wheel, so to speak, to try to combat that kind of thing. What's my next business venture? How can I prevent from this loss the next time?
Yeah.
And it's a consistent worry, if on that term.
You don't sleep because you're worried about your money.
Yeah.
Now, in verse 13, he goes on, there is a grievous evil. He's talked about this before in earlier chapters about this grievous evil that is upon man. There's this grievous evil which I have seen under the sun. I have observed this. Riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. And he says, it's grievous that guys that have money want to hoard it.
Yeah.
It actually ends up hurting them.
I read somewhere, Lynn, this week that it was almost like they guarded it or hoarding it with a clenched fist.
Yeah. Yeah. This idea of hoarding is to hold with not an open palm.
Yeah.
They're not generous. They hoard it. And it actually hurts them. And that's what 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10 talks about. That going after money, pursuing money, will ultimately hurt you. It'll take you off the path of good living.
Yeah.
And that's what he's saying here. And he goes, I've seen that. And he says, in fact, he's probably experienced that in his own life. And he says, when those riches were lost through a bad investment, and he had fathered a son, he had kids.
Yeah.
Then there was nothing to support him. So he goes, these guys who are trying to hoard their riches will lose it. And all of a sudden they can't support their family because they're so worried about losing their money that they lose it.
Yeah.
They grasp it so tightly that it slips through their fingers, so to speak.
But the next verse shows that they're going to lose it regardless.
Yep. Ultimately.
Yeah.
And he says, as he came naked from his mother's womb. Now, the he is this guy that has hoarded it to his hurt. He's hoarded his money. He's lost it. He can't support his family. And it says, look, he came naked from his mother's womb, so he will return as he came. He will take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in this hand. Hand. Now, he talked about this earlier in the book about when death comes, your kids who don't even care about your wealth, all they want to do is spend it.
Yeah.
And here he's basically saying, if your focus is money, you're going to lose it during your life, but you can't have a U-Haul behind the hearse.
Yeah. I lived in California, and there was a young lady who, her family was very wealthy, and she passed away. I can't remember exactly how she died, but she had a sports car that she was really fond of. So when they buried her sitting up in the sports car.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. And even myself as a lost person at that time, thought, have a vehicle to drive on the other side or something.
Yeah, that's like people that are wealthy people. They say, they put it in there where, bury me with my rings and my jewelry and all that stuff. And okay, fine. That's gonna do everybody a lot of good.
Yeah, exactly.
Your tomb.
Yeah.
Now, he asks a question in verse 16. He says, this also is a grievous evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus he will die. So he asked the question, what is the advantage to him who toils for the wind? In other words, he's so busy pursuing money that his toil produces nothing of substance. He's not like the guy up in verse 12, the working man, who works and enjoys life. He goes to work, he enjoys his work, he comes home, he rests. So this guy is looking for the advantage in life. Where's my money? And it's what advantage is the man who toils for the wind? That's this idea of vanity and pursuing wind.
Things you can't catch.
Things you can't catch. And then he finishes out the question in verse 17. Throughout his life, he also eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. Now, guys that are worried about losing their money and worried about everybody wants my money, they live a life of vexation. They live a life of worry, and they're angry that people want what they have.
Yeah.
And because our focus is on this idol called money. Jesus says you can't serve two masters. You can't serve money and God. You just can't. You got to pursue one and ignore the other. And that's what Solomon is talking about here.
Yeah.
Throughout his life, a rich man's life, he eats in darkness. He's always worried, vexation, sickness, and anger. And he could be healthy in the body, but he's sick in the heart because his desire and his focus and his dependence to be happy is on money. And that starts to address when we say, what do we depend upon? Is it our next paycheck or something else? Now, he asked that question in 16 and 17. And from verse 18 to 20, he's finishing up this perspective. He's been talking about the natural man who pursues money and wants to hoard it and keep it and ultimately becomes unhappy. And then from 18 to 20, he says, here is what I have seen. So again, this is his observation.
Yeah.
This is what I have seen to be good and fitting to eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself in all one's labors. Now, he's not just talking about eat, drink, and be merry and enjoy oneself. He's talking about being a working person who works for a living, who works to provide for his family and enjoys it.
Yeah.
It's good and fitting to eat and drink and enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has provided him For this is his reward. In other words, working is a reward, and a perspective of working should be, this is a way God has chosen to provide for me and my family.
Yeah.
It's not something to be grasped and pursued and, oh, I just want to be rich. That leads to a different place. But this idea now, he's bringing in the idea of the spiritual man has the perspective of, my work is given to me by God to provide for myself and my family. And I can enjoy that. I can be grateful for my job, for my work. And I've known guys that have been grateful for their job when the job is a tough job. But they're grateful because they have the perspective of, this is what God has given me. And when God wants to give me something else, he'll give me something else.
Yeah.
This goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden that was perfect. God gave Adam work to do. He said, here's the garden, cultivate it, work it. So even though Adam and Eve were in a perfect environment, it was still an environment where God expected Adam and Eve to work. And they enjoyed the work. Now, verse 19 and 20, very quickly. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth. So now this is a guy that God has provided and he's become wealthy. It says, he has also empowered him to eat from them and receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. So if God has provided you an income that's a good income, he's also given you the power, if you keep the focus, he's given you the power to rejoice in your labor.
Yeah.
Now, look down at verse 2 of chapter 6. We'll talk about this next week too. A man whom God has given riches and wealth, so that his soul lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God has not empowered him to eat from them or forever enjoy them. This is vanity and severe affliction. So if you don't take that empowerment to enjoy your life and you focus on the wealth, it's a severe affliction.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking about a gentleman started a business. He's passed away. He's been in heaven for probably 40 something years, but he started an insurance company and got very wealthy. He moved out of this area into another part of the country, but he took his wealth and he would have these big dinner parties and bring people in and bring speakers in. I think Billy Graham was one of them, and he would present the gospel to these people, people that I couldn't reach.
Yeah, sure.
He reached out to them, and when he passed away, he left millions of dollars to Christian organizations.
Yeah, I've known wealthy Christians who are extremely generous people.
Yeah.
And are giving all the time. Some of our supporters of Bible Study with Friends ministry, we are a tax-exempt ministry, and people are very generous towards supporting our ministry. Now, this idea of generosity and perceiving my wealth as a gift from God is a spiritual viewpoint, not the natural man's viewpoint.
Yeah.
I got this money, now I need to worry about keeping it. No, the Lord gave it to me. The Lord will bless me in it. That is a huge blessing. And then verse 20, for he, the one who receives money gladly, will not often consider the years of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. So if you're rejoicing in life and enjoying your work and enjoying life and thanking God for the blessings he gives you, you're not going to be sitting there saying, oh man, when am I going to die? Oh no, what? I'm getting old. I'm going to lose my money. Because when I die, it's going to be gone. It's going to go to somebody else. No, he says, God gives, with the wealth, he gives an ability, a blessing to enjoy your life and not worry about your money and what's going to happen after you're gone. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
I think this is very wise, and it's very practical to today of, what do I depend upon? Oh, I'll be happy if I have this money. That's a pursuit of money. How about, I'll be happy if I have this relationship with the Lord and he provides for me. That's
Yeah.
the spiritual perspective. And what do I depend upon for my life? I depend upon the Lord to provide for me. And if he wants to provide abundantly for me, and here in America, look, we're provided for very abundantly, but we need to have the perspective of not the natural man of how do I get more? How do I grasp what I do have? And how do I guard it? And we need to be generous people who say, this money came from the Lord and I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to be generous with it.
Exactly.
Today we've been talking about money. We've been talking about depending on wealth to get us happiness. If this video has touched you, has spoken to you, I want to recommend another video that you might find a blessing. It's from the book of James. It's right here. The title is called Depending on Your Money. And I think you'll find it interesting. And listen, we're going to continue with our study in Ecclesiastes next week. And until then, God bless you.